Today at the McGill Summer School, Fianna Fáil leader Micheál Martin said the Dáil today is more marginalised and has less influence on public affairs than any time in its 94-year history. Other speakers also criticised our parliamentary system. Suddenly it seems a new conversation has broken out about our politics. Tonight on the programme, we ponder new political possibilities. Joining me, former Minister for European Affairs, Lucinda Creighton, Mick Clifford, a columnist with the Irish Examiner, and two men who hope to break into politics, Ben Gilroy of Direct Democracy, who did well in the Meath East by-election, and Martin Creighton of the National Independence Party, which was launched only today. We'll be joined later by Nicola Cook, industry correspondent with the Sunday Business Post, to preview tomorrow's papers. If you'd like to comment on the programme, you could text us at 53131 and place the word tonight before your comment, or send us a tweet at #VinB, or email us at tonight@tv3.ie. We'll go on in a moment to talk about all the things I've outlined, but Lucinda, you're here, and let me just take this moment to start with you, because you are the most spectacular casualty of our present political system. And I'm just wondering, as you reflect now, what happened to you? What exactly happened to you? There's somebody of immense talent who had a very good 6 months in Europe, outstanding member of government, very popular, bang, you're dead. What did you do wrong?
Well, thanks very much. I don't quite know. I suppose in a nutshell, I voted against legislation which was sponsored by the government, which I felt breached a promise that we made before the last election, and which I was uncomfortable with and wasn't prepared to support, and I obviously pay the price for that.
What does it say about our political system where you find yourself tonight?
Well, it's certainly not about me. I mean, I feel very strongly, and I have articulated my views on the need for dramatic political reform, a system reform, in fact, in Ireland for a long time. Obviously, you know, I feel it very directly right now, but it's, you know, it's not about me. It's about the need for change.
It is about you, in the sense that we want politicians who believe in something. We want politicians who stand for something. We want politicians who want to stand up for something. And look what happens to one who does. Yeah,
there's very little room for that, quite frankly, in our current political system. We have a whip system which is, I suppose, a kind of a relic of the British system. I don't have a difficulty with a whip system. I think that within political parties you want to have like-minded people coming to agreement on some certain vital issues. It's essential, for example, on the budget, on finance measures and so on. But if you look at the British system, which our system is modelled on, you have a distinction in votes. So you have a 3-line whip for absolutely essential fundamental votes. You have a 2-line whip for less important votes, and a 1-line whip for other votes.
And of course, after all that, after all the meetings, after all the conferences, after all the Dáil debates, nothing was achieved in terms of crisis pregnancy in this country. Nothing was achieved. The politicians saved themselves, not the lives of women.
Well, or their unborn children, depending on your perspective. No, I mean, it's bad legislation as far as I'm concerned, and I've argued my case in the Dáil for.
And what message does it send out to young people watching this programme tonight? We're going to talk about the lack of young, talented people and ambitious people, and why politics in this country is no longer attractive to a whole class of people. What is what happened to you sent out to them?
Well, I mean, I think politics has been off-putting for quite some time, but obviously, you know, political life is tainted, and it's becoming more and more tainted, I fear. Less and less young people are involved in and interested in politics, and that's a bad thing. I mean, my first, if you like, first interaction with politics was when I was in 6th class, and I went on a school tour to Leinster House, and I try in my constituency to go to schools to talk to young people to try to whet their appetite, but it's very difficult, and there's a lot of cynicism out there.
A colleague of yours, Owen Murphy, today up at the McGill Summer School said the purpose of backbenchers is to turn up and shut up. He says the new people in politics will get frustrated and they'll walk away, and the ones who remain will eventually, unfortunately, be broken by the system and eventually forget why they got involved. 20 or 30 years down the line, we risk losing it all again. So a conversation is breaking out, is it?
Well, I mean, I think the conversation has been bubbling for quite some time, and I mean the McGill Summer School, I spoke at it I think 3 times in my 6 years in the Dáil, and this debate happens every year at McGill, being quite honest about it. I agree with Owen. I think that politics should be about ideas, and it should be about new thinking, new ideas, and we should be embracing it instead of fearing it and actually almost resenting it. New ideas are not welcome.
It could also, Michael Clifford, be about meritocracy. We could elect people who have immense ability, not because they're hurlers, not because who their father shot or didn't shot, not what side they took in the Civil War. But none of that happens.
No, but it goes beyond that.
The most extraordinary reasons we have for electing people.
Absolutely, Tom, but there's 2 sides to it. There's the politicians and there's the electorate. And the electorate are conditioned and have come to expect a personal service from their politicians, i.e. fix the lamp, ensure that, and in the vast majority of cases, it's a question of ensuring what they're entitled to anyway from the civil or public service. The electorate have come to expect that type of a service. This is seen by people who want to get into politics, and they go for that. Ivan Yates, he said it a number of times when he was the broadcaster after leaving the Dáil, he said he wouldn't advise anyone going to it. Most of the work was like social work, and that is the reality.
That is an extraordinary thing to say, because you're disbarring the talented, the ambitious. I mean, the people who go and run industry, who create jobs, who have distinguished themselves in all sorts of fields in the country, they don't go near the Dáil. Can this continue?
Well, you're right, but I mean, that's on the level of constituency getting elected. Then, when those who get into the Dáil, they find that the only place to be is to be in cabinet, because if you're not in cabinet, you have absolutely no say. So that excludes another huge cohort of politicians. There was a survey there a couple of weeks ago done by an academic in UCC of first-time TDs in the Dáil. A number of things came out of it. One of the interesting things was that the vast majority of them, while they were disillusioned at the system and it was a shock, etc., they still wanted to be a minister one day. So the be-all and end-all is getting into government.
And what is extraordinary, Lucinda, we've had ministers, and you'd wonder, are they qualified to do the job? I mean, it's extraordinary that you would never see a multinational putting in somebody to run their organisation who wasn't qualified in some sense. And these people end up in these jobs for party political reasons.
Well, the stark reality is that there's a huge amount of patronage in Irish politics. So, you know, if you toe the line and if you're prepared to go with the flow and not cause too many problems, chances are you'll end up as a junior minister or minister someday.
So the party comes first before the politics, in a sense?
Well, to some extent at least. I think, you know, when you look at parliaments in other countries, and I've obviously spent a lot of time over the last 2.5 years dealing and meeting with colleagues from all of the other EU member states and indeed beyond, the fact is that in most other countries it's quite a badge of honour to be a member of Parliament. Ministers often don't come from Parliament, they come from outside. They're selected from other walks of life. So to be a parliamentarian, you have to excel, you have to be an expert in your field, you concentrate on the committees that you're on, you excel, you climb the ranks on the basis of merit, and you know, to become a chair of a committee in a parliament is a really big deal. So it's not really the case here.
So across Europe, are they not doing drains and planning permissions and HIP operations and all of that?
They have regional government to do it. They have real local government.
So your politician doesn't do that?
Well, certainly nothing like to the scale that we have to do here.
They must be amazed at the things you have to do there.
In a lot of jurisdictions they would be. I mean, I wouldn't have necessarily compared notes with them on all of the work I would do in my constituency. But when you think about it, I mean, you know, the idea of real local government where, you know, decisions on local matters are taken locally, it's a career path in itself, or a vocation, if you like, in itself, to be a member of a regional authority or a local authority. In Ireland, it's just a stepping stone to become a TD, to become a minister, to, you know.
Imagine if you were a Norwegian politician, you said our Prime Minister was elected because he was good at ice skating. I mean, that's exactly the situation we have here.
It is, Tom, but I mean, the most basic sign of dysfunction is that within a constituency, because it's a multi-seat constituency, your greatest rival is your fellow party colleague. I mean, that says...
Why hasn't this conversation been had before, Michael?
Well, it has, you see. I mean, we come back to it again and again. Like, for instance, today, Micheál Martin and Michael McDowell were among two of them who were on this theme about the concentration of power.
They were at the trough for years.
Well, exactly.
It's a bit late for them to be changing their colours.
I recall Noel Dempsey at the height of the boom giving a similar speech in McGill. And to be fair to them, I'm sure they all mean it. But the thing is, once people get in there at that level, they don't want to see power.
We have two unfortunate men who, believe it or not, who want to get into politics, in terms of Ben and Martin. Ben, you did exceptionally well in that Meath East by-election, and people were surprised that a political party was surprised. Why didn't you join a political party?
Well, I didn't join a political party for the reasons that Lucinda has highlighted. I recognised very early on that the system is broke. It's not the individuals that are broke. The political system is broke. And I'm glad that Micheál Martin has taken notes of what I said during the by-election. Because the system is broke and you're under a party whip system. Lucinda fell foul to that because she spoke up for what she believed was right and was representing the people. The irony of that was that if she was actually with direct democracy, she would have kept her position in the party because she actually represented the people. Direct democracy doesn't believe in the whip system at all. And it's unfortunate that it has taken the country to actually run right onto the rocks for everyone else to recognise that the system is broke. And what we need is to reinstate a direct democracy system. It doesn't matter then what party's in government.
Yeah,
but
the phrase sounds good. What does it mean, direct democracy?
Well,
everybody is democratic.
Well, if you look at Switzerland, I mean, they have the direct democracy system, and because of
that...
cantons, yeah, and I believe that because of that, they're probably one of the best political systems in the world. They don't alienate the people. People feel like they have an input with direct democracy. We had it in our first constitution.
And why were people voting for you? To reject the system?
No, I think it's to change the system. I think for 5 years we've complained too much. Like, I could go on about figures about suicide and businesses in receivership to do with rates and everything else. I could go on all night about it. If there was a gold medal for complaining, we would win. What you've got to do is recognise what's wrong with the system and how to fix it. And I believe we should trust our forefathers that left direct democracy in our first constitution that was removed. You cannot alienate 75%, according to Micheál Martin, alienate 75% of the electorate and ask them then to get involved. You go into a system that's choked. I mean, TDs are there to say yes and no at the behest
But you never thought of joining one of the present political parties, and that's interesting.
Yeah, but because you're only going into a system where you're voiceless. I mean, I remember during the Meath by-election, everybody was saying they were going to be a strong voice, and I thought it was X Factor they were advertising. They don't have a voice. And as Lucinda said, if you shut up and put up, you will get on.
Martin, I first heard of you, you launched a new political party. I first heard of you, you walked from Limerick to Dublin.
Yes.
Was this sort of Ho Chi Minh method of gathering political followers?
It must be. Well, something had to be done. I mean, I've been watching...
And you walked through all those villages saying what?
Saying, we want change. You know, we need people to join a new movement and get involved in politics.
They said this is circus, did they? No.
No, they said fair play to you. I mean, you know, nobody is doing that in the cosy corridors of the Dáil. Nobody's trying to engage with people at a grassroots level and say, look, you know, how are we going to change the system? You know, it's a big ask to try and reach to that that goal. But you know, the thing is that you know you can't engage and change the system unless you know you're talking to people. So I got out there and started talking to people and find out you know what they thought about the country they lived in, and you know and what they wanted to see in terms of reform. And you know while we're busy talking here, the ship is still sinking. Yeah. You know, there's so much damage has been done on this austerity kick. You know, people wanted a plan. Yeah, but they wanted to know a way forward.
But you've launched the party today. You've now discovered how difficult it's going to be. Where are you going to get the money for a start?
Well, the thing is that people have been getting, you know, have rung us up. They've pledged, you know, what small amounts of money they have, believing that, you know, unless
small
they get...
brown envelopes.
Yeah. Well, no. We can't go down that route. We have to register all this with the SIPO and you know.
Listen to your brave man, Lucinda. What?
But you know,
he is, yeah. And I mean, look, I think new political movements are important, and you know, historically in Irish political life, you know, small parties, new parties have actually contributed in a really important way. Clonna Tolling, Clonna Public, the Progressive Democrats, at least at the start. You know.
I think now with the situation that we're facing, there is an absolute sense of urgency that something has to be done. I mean, Micheál Martin coming out today with this,
but
you know, it's just not the way.
There was a sense of urgency at the last election. We got a group of independents who hardly distinguished themselves, right? Yeah. They'll be appearing in the Gaiety and Panto at Christmas, by the way they're going on, right?
True.
See, that's the problem. You can have 150 new political parties by the time of the next election, but if they don't recognise that the system is wrong and try fix the system within, then that's the problem, and that's why direct democracy needs to be
I don't think it's a
there.
system problem. I think it's the people within the system. The system would work nicely and function well if the people actually ran the system properly. We're talking about a behavioural problem. We're talking about getting into power and not following through with what's been said. We'll do it in the manifesto.
Now, at the end of the day, that dictates to the people. And if you stand up for the people, you're cut off. Not at all. That's nonsense.
No, that is a people problem. No, that is an interpersonal problem.
The system is broken. It doesn't matter what the people are.
Nothing to do.
You tried to stand up for their rights and got thrown out.
Okay, Michael, I'm going to bring you in.
I think it's very admirable. Anybody who stands for election, I'd take my hat off to them, absolutely. Yeah. And there is position for small parties exerting pressure, what have you. But ultimately, the political culture that we have, if it is to change, that change will have to come from the main parties. Now, we have a scenario whereby the current government described the last election as a democratic revolution. It was going to completely reform politics. That's gone. Now we have Micheál Martin, who was there previously, is now telling us when he gets in, he's going to reform it. And there's an element of Tweedledum, Tweedledee about it, unless there...
So it's who you do trust. That is the common denominator.
But meanwhile, the political establishment have solved the problem by doing away with the Senate.
Well, come on. The biggest joke about that is the premise on which it's being done. There was no report. There was nothing. There was an opinion poll in which it was seen that Eamon Gilmore was doing better than the Kenyan opposition. It all flowed from that. And worse than that, that is now being given as an excuse for reform.
But what is absolutely extraordinary is they complained that the Senate was a place where politicians went to rest and all the rest, and it was a sort of like a nursery school or a retirement home. Who used it like that? The politicians.
Absolutely, and that's why there was no reform.
Trying to do away with it.
That's why there was never any reform, because every time the main parties didn't want it to reform because it was there for a purpose.
But you're talking about...
The very simple solution to that is you hold the Shannon elections on the same day as the Dáil elections, and then it can't be a retirement home for politicians who've lost their seats.
But also they set up the Constitutional Reform Committee to address some of the issues, and of course what the media have completely missed, that 83% wanted direct democracy. They wanted a direct democracy change.
Can I bring you on to the question of ability and talent? The President of America is elected and he sits down and he picks the best people in the country to do the job. No Irish Taoiseach can do that.
Well, Garrett Fitzgerald, in fact, used the Shannon as a vehicle to do that.
Yes.
Yeah, which was.
Mark McDonagh was used by Jack Lynch.
I would contend.
But now the Senate's apparently going to be cut away. That would close that avenue down, which is a reason it shouldn't be cut away.
I think it's important.
I wouldn't like to go near the American system.
I think it's important to have that capacity. Our Dáil is quite unique in terms of how representative it is of the people, and we complain about our TDs, but they are hugely representative of the country by virtue of
performance we're talking about, not representation.
I know. But I do think that it is important to have a connection between the Parliament and the Executive, and I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing to have parliamentarians become ministers. But certainly I would feel that not all of our ministers should come from the Parliament.
Would part of the solution to be like they have in Europe, where local politicians handle the block drains and the planning permissions, and your parliamentarian is a different... He doesn't come from a county, he comes down a different path.
Yes. We have too many TDs for that to happen, in my view. We have 166 TDs. We have one of the highest ratios in the world. And you have, in most constituencies, in all constituencies, either 3, 4, 5 TDs competing against each other to basically cultivate a voter base in those constituencies. It is quite ludicrous. I mean, you can argue it's very representative, but on the other hand, it creates this, as Mick has already alluded to, this sort of warfare within political parties and indeed between political parties to fight over who can get the most potholes fixed or whatever.
We all agree here there's a crisis. Where do you begin to start to change it?
Well, it's very difficult. I mean, unless what you might call the executive voluntarily decides that it's in the best interest to cede some power.
Hell will freeze over first.
Sure, but there is a problem. I mean, as you make the point about the local politicians should take care of the local interests. The problem there is the electorate has been conditioned to expect some kind of a personal service. So what you'll have is the local person who's doing all the local stuff, he or she is most likely to get elected to the next time around to the national parliament because they have that in with the electorate.
Meanwhile, there's something called a constitutional convention going on, which is discussing none of these things.
No.
I mean, it's another circus going on.
Of course.
Set within the context of our present politics,
not
stepping outside the box at all.
It's the smoke and mirror of reform.
Yeah.
Again,
it's a self-congratulation system.
It's like being on the Titanic and asked to rearrange the deck chairs. And what you're saying is, it's like, asking turkeys then to vote for Christmas. They're not going to change it. And that's why they should pay attention to the Constitutional Reform Committee and put the agendas up for referendum. That was their job.
It puts you in a very interesting place, Lucinda, as a major political figure in this country with a considerable following and possibly a larger following now because of what has happened to you, and somebody who is sympathetic to this, what we're talking about. It opens an opportunity for you to start within Fine Gael, within politics, having this conversation, saying these things. I'm trying to get you into trouble here, yeah?
I'm kind of thinking I sort of have one foot in and one foot out because I'm still a member of Fine Gael, but I have been kicked out of my party.
You're a Fine Gael TD because people elected you at Fine Gael.
No, absolutely.
It's the people who decide who you belong to, yes.
And I would argue that I have very much adhered to my party's principles.
Yes. But is this a conversation you think you should start? You'd be interested in starting? It's useful to start?
It's a conversation that I have engaged in since I was first elected to the Dáil, and I did it before I was a minister, I did it while I was a minister, and I intend to continue doing it. And I think that this country desperately, desperately needs real reform, and I will do everything I can. And I mean, I'm not alone.
Joan Burton says there's a government within a government. 4 guys running the place. Nobody else outside being told what to do. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Taoiseach Cornish to finance and...
In fairness to Joan Burton, she would have a much better insight into that than I do, because I was not a member of Cabinet.
Will she get 6 of the best for saying that?
Yes.
Well, I think it's something that is of interest and of some concern. But as I say, Joan Burton is much better placed to comment on it than I am. But when I say I'm not alone, I also mean that there are 5 other of my colleagues who have been kicked out of the Fine Gael Parliamentary Party in the Dáil, 2 in the Senate. And we are like-minded people who genuinely believe...
There was a lot held their nose there, weren't there? And jumped in, wasn't there?
There were.
Should also be pointed out, Roisin Shortall resigned her junior ministry position on the basis of policy, as sort of a policy issue with her very much so as well. No, Willie Penrose did as well, but that was a constituency issue, and that's back again.
Well, Labour are shedding them, like...
Well, there's another...
Won't be many more left.
Wasn't Peadar Tobin a victim of it as well? Voting with his conscience. Yeah, temporary, 6 months. It's like a sin bin, I think, isn't it?
Well, the Sinn Féiners tend to swim back to the lifeboats. They don't get lost. But where could we begin, Michael, to start? How could this begin? Like a commission or a constitutional convention, or drawing up a new document or something? And hang a second. And is our system as we have it dictated by the Constitution? Do we have to change the Constitution to change what we have?
No, quite the opposite.
It's how we've interpreted the Constitution. That's important.
As far as the Constitution is concerned, the government should be answerable to the Dáil. And the Dáil has as Emily O'Reilly was making this point the other night, and the Dáil...
Yeah, just tell us the point she made was important.
The executive, according to the Constitution, is answerable to the Parliament. Now, the Parliament, to a large extent, is irrelevant to lawmaking. It's the executive decides on law and makes the law, and that is it. The only way I think any of it is going to change is if pressure comes from the electorate. Now, we thought...
And how do you organise that?
Well, that's another issue. We thought there was a wave of...
You elect independents to go into the Gaiety pantomime?
No, not suggesting that either. We thought that was there at the last general election. We were told there was this democratic revolution that was in response to people's...
Well, he got part of it.
That's been... I mean, we bet a party in government. And you must remember, coming up to the election, main media ignored us completely. I understand the reasons for that. But, you know, direct democracy has been grown like wildfire now throughout the country. And what we're asking is all dissident groups, there seems to be a new one every day complaining about something, is to join in the umbrella of direct democracy and become a powerful group that we can effect change. Because that's why I didn't go with another party or run as an independent, because that was a waste of time.
Martin.
Well, I mean, looking at the structure of a DD system, you know, we've had a look at that already a year ago, when we recognised that, you know, to hit the ground running, to get this reform through quick, we've got to do something that's legislative, it's on statute. And we came up with a Citizens' Charter and said, look, we need a code of conduct, a behaviour code of conduct that is not policed by, you know, the Taoiseach.
Well, we have one. It's called Bunrock na Hare.
Yeah, but that's ineffective in a way. I mean, you could argue that you're doing something in the spirit of whatever you're doing it in. You know, anybody could argue that, and that's sort of works in the wording of these types of documents. We need something that's drilled down a bit deeper and says, if you're going to say something on an election platform, you don't deliver. You know, there's some penalty.
Well, that's right,
but,
because
no,
in the DD system,
Ben,
there was recall.
Can I just finish, Ben?
There was recall.
No, can I just finish, Ben? You know, recall would be down the track. We need something that comes in that week. Rather than the Taoiseach saying, OK, you've been a bad lad, but we still vote for you, you're a good minister and all that stuff. We want somebody like the Senate to come round, who's got a bit of extra teeth, and say that week, excuse me, you're answerable to the nation. We'd like you in the Senate to address
don't you guys start again, because I won't be able to stop you. Let me just say this to you, that in the debate coming up about the Senate, and I think it's disgraceful it's been thrown in a week after
absolutely.
I mean, they talk about democracy. They're trying to get rid of a part of the democracy. I think it's pretty shabby the way that's done. In the process of having that debate about the Senate, can we also have this debate, do you think, Michael, about politics in general?
Well, hopefully. I wouldn't claim to be confident, put it that way, Tom, but because, I mean, if you look at the pitch the government are doing in the Senate abolition, it's basically less politicians and save money. I mean, the less politicians thing is just
we have no politicians, if it's true.
So, I mean, there is a certain voices there among those who want to retain the Seanad that are making sense. Now, one can question about the credibility or what have you in terms of people who've been there before themselves, but I mean...
Lucinda, we're going to the break quickly, just to summarise what you were saying tonight in terms of the reform that's needed.
Well, we need wide-ranging reform throughout the political system, from the executive, the government, right down to local and regional government and everything in between, including the Dáil and the Seanad. One on its own is not adequate. OK. We'll have more discussion along with a preview of tomorrow's newspapers after the break.
A dent on your car and all your plans are dented too. But with pickup and delivery, AXA takes care of everything at no extra cost. 1, we'll take your car to an AXA garage. 2, lend you a courtesy car. And 3, we'll even deliver your car to your home or work once it's repaired so your life can carry on. For a quote, drop in, click or call 1890 24/7 365.
Quitting smoking is tough. Throw in coffee and you're smelling full-body temptation. Or are you? Traffic building, willpower fading. Its destination, cigarette. Or is it? Fantastic meal, yet you still hunger for the taste of tobacco. Try new Nicorette Quick Mist. Instant release spray for fast craving relief. Acts fast to help you quit. For every cigarette, there's a Nicorette.
3.1 billion questioning in the next budget. following on with the agreed bailout targets with the Troika. So Pat Rabbitte now is rowing in behind him, Minister for Communications, saying that he's disappointed that the Troika are playing hardball here, that are insisting on this 3.1 billion target. So, you know, there's kind of a fallout because Enda Kenny said at the weekend that, you know, he didn't foresee, he thought that we should stick to this plan. And also, 8 Fine Gael TDs have written in a letter to the Irish Times saying, yes, we should stick to this 3.1 billion, and they are, as you mentioned earlier, Owen Murphy, Sean Conlon, Paul Connaughton, Pat Deering, Brendan Griffin, Noel Harrington, Sean Coyne and Anthony Lawler. Now, they're saying that we should borrow for an investment programme, but I think the Labour stance on this is that we should use the money from the promissory note for an investment fund to create jobs. So you're just seeing, you know, the division is widening here between the two, and he's kind of saying, you know, taking a few digs there at the Troika, saying that they're changing the goalposts and, you know, this is an arbitrary quantum of money, and that really we should be able to, you know, it's the deficit of 3% by 2015.
The other major story on the papers, of course, is the death of a colleague and friend, Colin Murray, at Peace, the Sun says, and a nice photograph in the Examiner of all of the crowd and the jockeys down at Galway.
Yes, this is nice.
Silence.
Yes, they're just before one of the races there. They're wearing the black armbands, and I just thought it was poignant to note that Colin spent the first day of his honeymoon 33 years ago at the Galway races, and it was lovely just that there was this lovely tribute paid to him. And the race manager said, you know, Colin had a great graw for Galway and he was a great ambassador for the sport. And I just think there's been tributes flowing in, rightfully so, from all around for Colin.
And then the other story really is the updating of the aftermath of the death of the two children.
Yes, this is Owen and Rory Chadha, who died, it seems tragically. Their father, Sanjeev Chadha, is expected to be released from hospital tomorrow, and it is hoped then that the Gardaí will question him. So some post-mortems have been completed, and it appears that the children died from asphyxiation, which can be caused by choking, strangling or smothering. So there's no obviously conclusive kind of evidence of any of this yet, so that the Gardaí will be speaking to him tomorrow about that.
You'd have to wonder, I mean, Lucinda might be able to help us here, but the 8 backbench TDs in Fine Gael, they'd never have been put up to it, would it, to put their names up there on behalf of perhaps those higher up in the hierarchy of power or anything, would they?
I'm not on the inside track now.
No, but I'm just from experience, would that type of thing be likely to go on?
Oh, not in my time. Not in my time.
Is 8 a significant number? What is their nickname? Is there a group of them?
Their nickname was the 5-a-side, but...
but they can't count as 8.
Well, I think it was the media that came up with the nickname, so...
These folks have come in, obviously, now to the 5-a-side.
Yeah.
What else, Nicola?
Yeah, then we're just a nice story there. Maybe they're saying Artemis Fowl, the children's book series.
Tell us about that. Yes.
Yeah, so it's a children's book series. Owen Coulter wrote this series, and it's sold 21 million copies around the world already, which is a fantastic number. But they're saying it could become the next Harry Potter. So there's Hollywood producers Harvey Weinstein, and looking Weinstein and Robert De Niro as an executive producer. So basically the screenplay is being finalised by Michael Goldenberg at the moment, who wrote Harry Potter, and Owen Coulter, the author, is saying that it might come to screen in the next 18 months. So that could be, you know, obviously a nice...
It's extraordinary. I mean, that's his first children's book in a sense, isn't it? And it's hit the jackpot.
Yeah, exactly. It's a huge, and, you know, just good for Irish writing and Irish authors.
And also, another story in the Examiner there about the Cork refinery closure. Why are they closing the refinery?
Well, they're just saying that if it closes, because it's got an infinite lifespan, that it will result, because it's just isolated, because that refinery is servicing Cork, Kerry, Limerick, Waterford, Tipperary and Clare. So because there's so much coming through to that refinery and it's infinite, you know, they're just saying that if it does close, or it's forced to close for any reason, that Munster customers would have to pay almost 10 million extra a year. So it's not saying when it's going to close, or we're just saying that the customers down there are too dependent on that as a source of oil at the moment.
Yeah, I'm just looking there. Brothers looked asleep in the boot of the car. To me, that's one of the saddest stories. It kind of puts the picture in your mind. And then, of course, one of the funniest stories is Labour accusing the Troika of moving the goalposts. I think they'd be experts in moving goalposts from their pre-election mantra of Frankfurt's way or Labour's way.
A final thought?
The other interesting, Bradley Manning is going to be...
This is a great story.
Yeah, and I mean, what
he was found not guilty on the charge that...
He aided the enemy.
That made him a traitor, yes.
Yeah, but guilty of espionage
guilty of being a
and
whistleblower.
theft. Yeah. And I mean, what I found amazing is the speculation tonight is that he may spend the rest of his life in prison. He's 25 years of age.
Or the Senate.
Or it's scandalous.
It could go that way.
It's one thing, the American justice system, sometimes they really get it in for people.
When they're vindictive.
Oh, they can be very vindictive, yeah.
But I think the real crime here is on the Labour story here. I mean, you know, if we're going to get any movement in this country, we really need to go back to Europe and say we need a moratorium on the debt. We need to reduce the debt interest repayments. We need to make some room in the economy so we can grow it.
Looking at what you're saying, you're actually a Eurosceptic party. Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say sceptic. We're just wondering what Europe's doing. Are they friends of ours, or are they working against us at the moment? You know, we're stagnating.
That's what Pat Rabbit is saying.
Yeah,
we've ticked off all the
we've
boxes.
ticked all
so
off
give
the
us a bit
boxes.
of breathing
So, you know,
space.
what more do you want from us? You know, literally, if they're our friends, they should be helping us out. And the thing that really worries me out of all this, you know, we've looked over the last 30, 40 years, you know, change in the Berlin Wall. You know, you look at what Russia was like. You know, have these Europeans not learned that, you know, you've had satellite states in a centralised economy like the USSR, you know, and the periphery states, you know, like Lithuania.
Well, I got
to
put the last question to you because you know more about Europe than anybody. You spent the last 6 months running the place. Your reflections now after 6 months on the whole European experiment?
Well, I mean, the point about reducing interest rates and reducing the debt burden, that has substantially improved in the last 2 years. And you know, you can brush aside the progress that has already been made, but that is the reality. There has been substantial improvement.
We're not substantial enough. We're still scratching
when you look at, I mean, this debate between the Labour Party and Fine Gael about, you know, whether we should do more or do less. Yeah. My personal view is that we should be trying to get the fiscal consolidation done as quickly as possible so that we can move on to the next phase of growing our economy. Putting it off until another day is not a solution. And there is still a huge amount of waste in this country, huge waste in the system,
so we're still asking the people to take the burden when there's all this waste here. When actually the government should be dealing with it.
Thank you very much indeed. That's it for tonight. More on tonight's programme when they roll the autocue. That's it. Good night.